Hi folks, HR Funk here, with a brand new rifle to review for you today, and what I have, at first glance, might appear to be the legendary HK91 rifle, and if that's what you were thinking this is, you were almost right. What this actually is the American-made PTR version, which is manufactured right here in South Carolina by PTR Industries, and it is a very close copy of the HK91. Now I've got to say at the outset of this video, I am not an authority on the HK91, so I'm going to be sharing what I do know about that rifle, and we're going to take a close-up look at the PTR 91, and before we're all done, we'll go out and do some shooting with it. To begin with, the PTR 91, or I should say the HK91, is based on the HK-G3, which is a battle rifle with a lineage that goes all the way back to 1950. The G3 rifle has been used by various governments and military organizations around the world, and it has a very good reputation as a battle rifle. The PTR version very closely follows the G3 or the civilian HK91 rifle. This particular one is the PTR A3S, and if you look at PTR's website, you will see that there is quite an array of model designations, and you won't see one that looks exactly like this. The reason is because the forearm, or handguards rather, on this rifle have been replaced and the bipod has been added. But otherwise, it's just the way that it was manufactured by PTR. This particular version, unlike the original HK91, does have an integral top rail for mounting optics. So that's one departure from the basic HK91 design. This rifle has black plastic furniture, and it comes in at a weight that's fairly substantial. One of the things I've noticed while handling this rifle is it's not a lightweight. And a little while ago I put it on the official Cabela's scale and it was coming in at over 10.5 pounds. So this is a rifle that if you're going to be carrying it, just be aware it's not something like your standard M4 or AR-15. The PTR 91 is chambered for the 7.62 NATO cartridge, and it feeds from a 20-round detachable box magazine. This rifle has two different release mechanisms for the magazine. It has the button style here on the side of the receiver that can be pushed in to release the magazine. Or you can use the paddle style that's right in front of the trigger guard. Either one will release that magazine. Also, the PTR 91, since I have the magazine installed, does not have a last round bolt hold open when the magazine is empty. So that's another thing to be aware of if you're familiar with or accustomed to using rifles that have that last round bolt hold open feature. The PTR 91 does not have that. The PTR 91 also utilizes a safety that is similar to the one that is found on the HK MP5. And just like with the safety on the MP5, I really don't like this one because it's difficult for me to reach while I'm still grasping the pistol grip of the rifle. Another point about the safety, as you'll notice, it does have the American style S for safe and F for fire. This is a semi-automatic only rifle, and the designations or the markings are not the same as you would have on the German manufactured HK91 that would have the SE or SEF markings, or perhaps even the little pictograms designating which fire mode the rifle is in. Moving up closer to the PTR 91, we can see that it employs the HK style drum rear sight and the front sight post, which is protected by the signature HK style round guard. The PTR 91 employs the roller delayed blowback operating system, and with other firearms that I've shot that employ that same system, I found them to be very soft shooting and controllable. So I'll be interested to see when I get out to the range with this rifle if that system has the same effect on the 7.62 by 51 cartridge. The PTR 91 has an 18-inch match grade barrel with a G3 style taper. It employs a 1-turn in 10-inch rifling twist ratio, and it has a removable flash hider. And if you want to replace the flash hider with a different muzzle device, the thread pitch is 5/8 by 24. The PTR rifle has the folding HK style charging handle, and as I mentioned before, the rifle does not have a last round bolt hold open when the magazine is empty. So to lock the bolt to the rear, you do have to rotate it into this notch. And to charge the rifle, you simply take it out of the notch and allow the action to close. Without a doubt, my biggest criticism of this rifle is the trigger. The trigger on this rifle, and I think this is not atypical of the HK91 design, is, in a word, awful. This trigger is long, it's heavy, it's creepy, it's stagey, and it has some over travel. In case you didn't catch that the first time, watch as I squeeze the trigger. See all that movement, it's gritty. Now, in defense of this rifle, it is in battle rifle format, and you typically don't get a match grade trigger on a battle rifle. But again, that's my biggest criticism of this rifle. Just for fun, I want to see if I can get a trigger pull weight on this rifle. And if I can get the glare off, it's coming in at over 10 pounds. So again, not a very good trigger on this particular rifle. As mentioned earlier, this particular version of the PTR rifle has the integral Picatinny rail for convenient optics mounting. It's finished in a black powder coat, and it comes with a limited lifetime warranty. And that's pretty much going to do it for our shop review of the PTR 91. Now let's head off to the range and see how it shoots. And I've arrived out on the range with the PTR 91 rifle to do some shooting with it and see how it's going to perform. And in preparation for coming out here, I installed this very nice Steiner 1:4 power scope, partly because I want to test out the accuracy potential of this match grade barrel. And because of the Picatinny rail that I mentioned earlier, the scope installation took me all of about 15 minutes, and it was very simple. And something I wanted to correct with regard to a comment I made about this rail earlier, I did refer to that as an integral Picatinny rail. It's actually welded to the top receiver, it's not integral to it. So I wanted to correct that statement that I made before. Also, both this rifle and the scope were loaned to me by a viewer for this review, and I want to say thank you to that viewer for letting me test out the rifle and share it with all of you. Now, so far since I arrived out here, I've fired 3 rounds through the rifle just to establish a rough 25-yard zero. Next, I'm going to move back to a distance of 100 yards and finish zeroing the rifle. After that, I'll fire a couple of groups to test out the accuracy potential of this barrel, and eventually I'll move back up and do a little bit more close range shooting from standing and other field positions to see how the rifle does in that mode. So here we go. And here is my final zeroing group from 100 yards. I've got one shot dead center of the target, one just off to the left, and then I've got one low. And this was similar to the first 3 shots that I fired from 100 yards that I used these to adjust from. And I think what's happening is because of that trigger, I'm once in a while starting to throw around, and that's why this one is so much lower than these two. And because of that, I'm not actually going to fire an accuracy group on a bullseye target. Rather, I'm going to put a silhouette target up here and do some shooting with that, because I don't think it's fair to the rifle, since I'm not used to that trigger, to try to fire it with absolute precision accuracy, because I don't think that it's going to be up to its potential with me shooting it, just not being used to that trigger. Okay, let's go see where they hit. And there was no problem keeping all 5 shots inside of the Q target from 100 yards. Now this group is not all that impressive, and there are a couple of reasons for that. First off, as I said earlier, I'm just not used to this trigger, and it is a very heavy trigger. But I also discovered that my scope mount is loose, and I don't have any tools with me out here to tighten this up. So at this point, I'm going to discontinue the accuracy testing of the rifle, at least at any kind of distance, and I'm going to remove this scope and come up and start doing a little bit more close range shooting with just the iron sights. So again, I'm sure the rifle is capable of better accuracy than this, but I just can't demonstrate it right now with the scope mount being this loose. And on we go. The scope is now removed. We're back to iron sight battle rifle configuration. The rifle is noticeably lighter, so let's see how it does shooting from behind cover from a distance of 40 yards. And I managed to pull a few of those shots off from that distance of 40 yards. And again, a lot of this has to do with that trigger. Trying to manage the trigger and keep those sights centered on the target is a little bit of a challenge. I was actually aiming here on the target, and you can see my shots are hitting low, and then some of them again are going off to the left. And I've now moved up to a distance of 25 yards, and I'll see how the PTR 91 does firing it from a standing position at this distance. And those standing shots from 25 yards actually look pretty good. They're pretty close to the center of the target, so that part at least was probably the best shooting that I've done with the PTR 91 since I've been out here. So in the end, what do I think of the PTR 91 rifle? Well, let's start with the good. It was 100% reliable in my shooting out here, which doesn't surprise me, given the history of this rifle, or at least this rifle's design, with all the various military units that have employed it. I expected it would be very reliable. Also, I think the accuracy is pretty good in terms of mechanical accuracy. Even with the loose scope mount, my 100-yard group was not awful, and I'm firing surplus ammunition out here today, so I'm not firing match ammunition. And from 100 yards, it was really not that bad. It was a couple of minutes of angle. If the scope mount had been tight, I think I could have probably brought those groups down a little bit more. And if I had a higher power scope, remember that was only a 4-power scope that I had mounted on here. So again, the accuracy I think isn't bad. Now, the comments that I'm going to make at this point are not leveled at the PTR rifle specifically, but really they're directed more at the HK91 rifle or the G3 rifle in general. And in general, I feel like this design is becoming a bit dated. First off, it's a very heavy rifle. As I said back in the shop, it weighs over 10.5 pounds, and you definitely notice that when you're standing here holding it for a while. Also, the ergonomics of the rifle, with the safety that's difficult to reach and the charging handle that you have to reach forward up near the front of the handguard and pull back to charge, is another one of those factors. The lack of a last round bolt hold open, I think, is another ergonomic factor, or at least design factor, that if you're used to firing more modern rifles, you notice definitely being missing here. Now, as far as the roller delayed blowback action is concerned, I think it helped to dampen the recoil of that 7.62 NATO ammunition somewhat, but you still get a substantial amount of recoil, and you still know you're shooting something that's chambered for that cartridge. It doesn't feel like you're shooting a 22 or anything like that. You know you're definitely still shooting something chambered for that 7.62 cartridge. And the trigger, as I said, is awful. So again, ergonomically, I think this design leaves something to be desired. In terms of the mechanical sights, I would say the HK drum style rear sight is an acquired taste, and it's something, just like most of the rest of the rifle, that I'm not used to. I suppose if I shot it a lot, I would get more used to it. But for now, I think I'll just stick with my aperture sights on the ARs or my M14 or what have you. So in the end, I think the PTR rifle is a good quality firearm for what it is. But for me, I'll stick with my ARs, M1, and my M14. So that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you order anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you order from Optics Planet. See you next time, folks. Until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.